What's happening, YouTube? It's Simon466cards, and today I'm kicking off a 3-part series on Fanatics and their business. Today, part 1, we're going to ask a really simple question. If Fanatics could sign one person, just one person, to grow the hobby, who would it be? So that's the question we're going to address today. As you all know, Fanatics has a goal to 10x the hobby, to grow the number of collectors in the hobby. We've heard it a million times. I'm not going to go over it. So if that is their goal, then who could they sign to help achieve that goal of growing the hobby? Whether or not they're going to get the 10x, time will tell. But who would make the biggest impact if they were able to sign that person, right? So to figure that person out, or to figure out who that person is, we have to describe the traits that this person should have. Who or what would this person be like? So I'm going to go through those characteristics and attributes now. First one is, obviously, if you want to sign someone to grow the hobby, they need to have name recognition across the world. It can't just be in the US or a specific country in Europe or just in Asia. It has to be worldwide name recognition, right? Second thing is broad appeal. You can have worldwide name recognition, and it could be negative name recognition. You need someone with broad appeal in addition to name recognition, right? You can't have someone who's infamous. You need someone who's famous and appeals to a wide range of people, a wide audience. Third one should be pretty obvious. You need to have a connection to sports, or this person needs to have a connection to sports, but also the non-sports world, right? Because that's how you bring people over into cards, is to tap a new market that's been more or less not associated with cards. The one after that is, person has to be charismatic and energetic. You can't have someone who's on the quiet side, is kind of boring. You know, like that type of person isn't going to energize a whole new set of people. You need someone who brings out a lot of enthusiasm and, pardon the pun, the fanatics out, right? You need someone who's gonna just bring that energy and get them motivated to get into cards. And if someone's more of a passive person, that's not really gonna work. You also need someone with a long legacy. If someone is relatively new to being famous, they're not going to have that history built up with the fan base, with their fan base, where they trust that person and they don't feel as connected to that person, right? If there's, someone who's come on the scene in the last, 2 to 3 years, you need someone with a long legacy and a long history with their fans. But alternately, this person also can't be too old. So you need someone who's not old but has a long legacy, which seems contradictory, but as you'll see with the examples I have, it's actually not. But it does really narrow down the number of people that would fit this criteria, because it's someone who's not too old, but also has a long legacy, which obviously that means you have to start pretty young, right? We don't need 75-year-old Martin Scorsese or one of those older actors. It doesn't make sense. You can't have someone who's in their 80s, like Jack Nicholson or whoever, doing this, because that's not going to inspire people to come over to Fanatics and to grow the hobby, right? So those are the criteria. Let me know if you have additional criteria that you think belongs with what I've listed here. But broad strokes, I think this makes sense. So who fits this criteria? Well, I actually came up with 2 people who came to mind. And the first one is Taylor Swift. Let's go through the characteristics and attributes and see if they match. Worldwide name recognition, obviously. Broad appeal, absolutely. Connection to sports and non-sports, well, obviously in the music world, non-sports. The sports world, Travis Kelce, we're done there. Charismatic and energetic, definitely. Someone with a long legacy, yeah, she's been around for 15, closer to 20 years at this point, and that's why she has a long legacy. Worldwide superstar, I'd say one of the most famous people in the world at this point, but is also still in her 30s. She's not that old, right? So Taylor Swift fits this criteria perfectly. There's just one little problem, and it's that Fanatics already tried to get her to do a card with Travis Kelce last year, and Taylor Swift, or Taylor Swift's manager or her people, didn't respond, so Fanatics left it alone. So this idea, it makes sense, but Taylor Swift herself didn't seem that interested, so this idea does not work. So we have to go back to the drawing board and talk about who the other candidate is. And I only have one question for you. Do you smell what The Rock is cooking? Because that is the other person. Worldwide name recognition. Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, absolutely. Broad appeal, absolutely. Sports, yep. WWE. And non-sports, Hollywood. Charismatic and energetic. I can't think of someone who is more charismatic than The Rock, Dwayne Johnson. And he's got a long legacy, but he isn't that old. He's only 52. So he is able to combine that legacy of Hollywood and also being a wrestler with the fact that he started quite young in wrestling, right? So he does combine all of these things together. And I think he is the perfect person for Fanatics to sign. Except there's one problem. It doesn't make sense for Fanatics to sign The Rock until 2026 because Fanatics isn't getting the WWE trading card licensing contract until 2026 because Panini has that deal. Fanatics tried to sue or WWE tried to get out of the deal with Panini, but then you can see this is a headline from a lawsuit that happened, but ultimately Panini won that lawsuit or won the court proceedings. So Panini is going to be with WWE until 2026 when their deal expires, and then Fanatics can take over. Even though Fanatics tried to get it started last year, I believe it was. So that's part of the problem, is that the person that is best suited to help Fanatics grow the hobby outside of its existing card base can't do it for another couple of years. But when he does sign in 2026, or I guess I should say, if he does sign in 2026 to, get a piece of that WWE deal and start signing cards, because he hasn't signed a lot, it coincides perfectly with Moana, a live action 2026 film. It is not just a cartoon. You can see here, it is a live action adaptation of the 2016 film Moana. So he's doing a live version of this. So I think that'd be a perfect movie that could get him tied into both the Disney side and also the WWE side. It actually coincides perfectly in the same year. I bring this up because Topps has already expanded and signed a card deal with Disney consumer products. You can see that on the screen. So I think this points to The Rock, if he was ever to sign with Fanatics, to not signing until 2026 because he's got Moana, which is a huge film. He'll be the star of it. You've got the Topps contract or the Fanatics contract going with WWE in 2026. So if Fanatics could sign someone to grow the hobby, I think it's The Rock, and I think if that were to happen, it might happen 2 years from now in 2026. So that is my theory as to both who makes the most sense to grow the hobby and also when it might happen. Would love to hear your thoughts and comments on who else you think would fit the criteria I just talked about. But that's it for this video. As I mentioned earlier, this is part 1 of a 3-part series on Fanatics and their business. Next time around, we're going to talk about some of the wins and some of the losses that Fanatics has had over the last couple of years as they've taken over the sports card industry. And if you look at the good things and you look at the bad things, I'm noticing a couple of common themes about what they've done well and what they've messed up. And we're going to talk about those commonalities in the next video. Thank you, as always, for listening and watching. I'll talk to you all soon. Cheers.